Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Cristello. I'm the Director of Programming here at EXPO Chicago, as well as the Editor-in-Chief of The Scene, Chicago's International Journal for Contemporary and Modern Art. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 7th edition of EXPO Chicago, taking place here at Navy Pier. And I wanted to introduce you to the Dialogues program. So Dialogues is presented in partnership with the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and is a year-round program of provocative artistic discourse, conversations, and discussions with leading artists and curators on the current issues that engage them. A special thank you must go to Artnet, who is our media partner for this panel, and their continual support of the exposition. Today, we're going to have a panel conversation surrounding the In Situ program and Iván Navarro's work. Known for his large-scale installations in both public and indoor spaces, using neon as a primary medium paired with mirrored reflections, artist Iván Navarro is being joined today by Marcela Guerrero, the assistant curator at the Whitney Museum of American Art. Iván, who is represented by not one or two, but 3 galleries exhibiting at the exposition, Paul Kasmin Gallery, Gallery Hyundai, and Gallery TEMPLON, will discuss various projects that he has on view in Chicago currently within the context of his relationship to critiquing power and institutional structures. If you are at Navy Pier, which we all are, I would really welcome you to go see the installation that is currently being presented by Navy Pier called This Land is Your Land, and it is Iván's largest public installation to date, in addition to the many works that we have here at the fair. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to our panelists. Thank you.
You don't have to do anything, it's on. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, thank you.
Hi, everyone. So it's my pleasure to be here chatting with Iván. We've known each other for a couple of years, and this is kind of a reunion, so I'm very happy to talk and go. We're going to go kind of from his latest works, I would say, to more to older works. And I thank you for putting this slide up, because you might be wondering, why are we talking about Woody Guthrie? It's not, I think, what people expect at Expo Chicago, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about why we have this slide here.
Okay, so one of my main or big interests as an artist I have is music as a document, as a historical document, as a connection to the moments in society that we've lived through. So I research a lot about folklore and folk music and popular music. And so especially Latin America, the music history in Latin America is very important. It's very strong because it's such a response to important political moments in the continent. And then there are in the United States and in Europe are very similar artists that they do similar, they play similar music, but they've never met, or my understanding that they didn't know about each other. So one of these artists is Woody Guthrie, who, as you probably know, who composed music, and in a very similar spiritual way than music was composed in Latin America during the 50s and the 60s. Now Woody Guthrie composed the music a little bit before. And for me, it's a very important figure in the universal history of folk music, and very influential.
You want to go to? Yeah.
So one of the kind of music that I'm interested in understand and research about the influence of Woody Guthrie is what had to do with the hobo music, and how this music is a representation of people who are usually looking for opportunities to work, going from town to town, almost like a nomadic thing. So, which is called here the migratory workers. So, using this, when I found these two records, especially, I start thinking about the history of the hobo music in the U.S. and the connection to Latin America and all those things that I'm telling you. And I found the lyrics of This Land Is Your Land. And one of the things that was particularly interesting to me was in each, how do you say, stropha?
Yeah, I never know. That stanza.
Thank you. Ends with the me, with the word me. So that was one of, formally, it was very interesting how the lyrics of the song had that repetition after every stanza.
Wait, I want to call attention to one particular. I was reviewing the song for the talk today, and I thought that the stanza that starts, as I was walking, I saw a sign there, and that sign said no trespassing, but on the other side, it didn't say nothing. Now that sign was made for you and me. I think that that's your work summarized in that stanza. And
Yeah.
I don't know how familiar people are today that are listening to us of your work, but I think that that's a really great entry point, not only because it's a song, and music is so influential in your work, but also the idea of the sign, the idea of the reflection, the idea of me, and how that, through your work, you complete, you always show half of that, and then the viewer completes the other half. So, sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's perfect that you said that, because when the lyrics really, for me, it's more than an inspiration to make a piece. It's kind of a guide. And sometimes I really take things literally, to say okay, it's talking about a sign. And then I build the whole idea of the work based in the idea of a sign and what is a sign about, and then how things usually start. So I'll go here. So we go to the word, to the me. So when I was creating this piece, I took from the lyrics the idea of the me. So when you put the me in front of a mirror, it turns into a we, which is practically almost works as if in a reflection, what's real, what's the illusion, or what's the positive, the negative, or the me as a one person, or the we as the public. So it plays with the duality. And that's how it works. The mirrors create that effect. The other effect that the mirrors create, that it has to do with the idea of, for me, reading the lyrics of a song and how this is sort of like literature and it's fiction, it's a representation of something, is when you put half of a symmetrical word in front of a mirror, you can complete the word only in the reflection. So the complete word only lives in the illusion of the reflection of the mirror. And I think that's a very interesting thing when you use mirror, when you work with mirrors, and you can only read the piece in a mirror. So, and that's why I'm using the mirrors. Otherwise, there is no other reason. There is no reason.
Right. Yeah, no, and then the idea, I mean, I don't know of other artists who are using with, that idea of the vertical symmetry, because it's not a palimpsest. It's not. Yeah. It's the it's vertically how I do it with my hand. and and it's you sculpt half of the word, and then the viewer, through its experience with the mirror, completes the work. I think there's
Exactly.
something very poetic about that, and you'll see it through the images. And when you experience actually the water towers, that maybe we can talk about the water towers that are here outside of the expo, that there's also an exercise, like almost physically an exercise of moving your head, moving your neck, and there's something about the physicality of experiencing your work that's, I think, very important to your practice.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when the pieces are installed, like the way they're installed here, this installation was the first time I made this installation was in Madison Square Park in New York. And so what was interesting, that people had to look up, which is, in many other pieces I've made, people usually look down, and there is some kind of sense of vertigo, and it's like a more darker feeling, if you want to say. But in this case, there is some kind of idea, of optimistic idea, just the physical reaction of looking up. And that's one of the reasons that another piece or another image inside the water tower is a ladder, and how the ladder, which is also, let's say, one section of the ladder where you see the black line, the black circle, is the real piece of mirror, real piece of neon, and then everything else is a reflection. So it really plays with the idea of the endless ladder going all, to touching the sky.
Yeah. I'll add to that. I don't know if you've thought about this, but there are some like religious undertones. I was just thinking of that act of, in what other scenario are you looking up in an optimistic, sort of positive, hopeful way? And that's usually in churches. And
Totally, yeah. It's something that I try to not to get too close to it, because I'm not like a very religious person. But I think the light and the symbolism of a ladder is very human. It almost has no, obviously could have connection to religion, but not necessarily.
it's more a humanist thing.
Yeah, that's what I feel. That's what I feel. It's something. No. Something happened. Sorry. So I'll just tell you a little bit what is the project about, what is the connection to this land is your land. And so when I was telling you about the hobo music and the origin of the hobo music, that it was at beginning of the 1900 or 1915, there was this economy in the U.S. that is the migratory workers, and how migratory workers were going town to town by train to look for new opportunities, to have a very optimistic, journeys. So the symbolism of the water tower was every time there was a water tower, that would mean that there was a town where they were producing something. There was some kind of a farm or a factory.
Some means of economy.
Exactly, because it's saving water for some use, So there was something that was the reason why a water tower was there. So that was where the workers would get off the train and look for work, out of the blue. Like, okay, here is looks like a promising, like something that maybe we'll find some work to do here. And that's how temporary workers and migratory workers start going from town to town, and usually have, they would bring a guitar and they would play music about what they were doing there. So that's one of the reasons that I took the name This Land is Your Land for the project, but in a different situation, because it's now is in a completely different time of history, and so the water tower, even if they still exist, they're such a old-fashioned thing. You know, I mean, it's even hard to believe that they're still being used as water towers, especially in New York. You still see them in every rooftop. But there is when they are installed in public spaces, they also is where people are in transit. And for me, it's very similar to the idea of migration, where the workers were going town to town to look for work. And now the water towers or the installation is usually in parks in the middle of a city, where people and workers are going from one side to the other side of the city, and they look at the pieces. For me, there is a sense of transitority when they go through them. And I connected to the original idea of what the water tower used to mean for people.
Do we have an image of? We don't have an image of the one here in Navy Pier.
No, I couldn't take it.
I wanted to connect it back, the idea of music, and I know that Victor Jara is very important in your work, and this might be a stretch in my interpretation of the water tower specifically, but there's something about the field and where you put these water towers that it's somewhat reminiscent of, or makes me think of the soccer stadiums, where in fact Victor Jara was and many other were tortured and killed. Is there something about that? And maybe you can speak a little bit more about Victor Jara and what.
Well, Victor Jara is a Chilean composer who, for me, was very influenced by Woody Guthrie, but through another folk composer. Her name is Violeta Parra, and they are like really the roots of folk music in Latin America. But they have always like a difficult, or they were very critical to the establishment. And that's a very important thing to know about why I'm using these kind of artists as a reference to make work, because their lyrics is always a protest to the establishment or the government. Before the water towers, I'm going to show a little extract of this video, and it's based in a song that Victor Jara used to sing, but it comes from a Mexican composer from the Mexican Revolution, so it's from the 1915. So I'll. So this is. Can you put the volume down? Yeah, thank you. So this is mainly like, I don't know how to explain well, but it was a performance. So it's a documentation of a performance that the performance was edited into a video. So like a video clip with a song. So the song was this song called Juan de Landless, or Juan Sin Tierra. There is originally is a Mexican corrido. And the idea is a person who wanders about a farm and escaping from the government, because the government already took his land, took his family, took everything, and the only thing this person wants is to find a place where he can die. And that's the interesting thing, since the government took everything from him. He even took a place for him to die.
Wow.
So he's not even like allowed to die.
Right.
You know. As a metaphor of that, I made this sculpture that is a movable sculpture. It has the shape of a shopping cart made out of fluorescent lights. But the idea was to go around the city in a very similar way that the water towers are installed, that they really work with the city as a site, and look for electric outlets that are usually available on street lights, on lampposts. So the idea was to go around these different blocks in Manhattan, in Chelsea, and see where you can open this the button of the lamppost and see if you find the outlet. There is usually there is one. Sometimes they don't work, sometimes they work. But that was the point of the performance, to go almost with no plan, and then open every little post and see which one worked, and the one worked. We plugged it for 10 minutes, photograph, and then go to the next.
I think you said something right before we started watching this video. You said the phrase critical to the establishment, and the more I see this work, it makes me think of what the galleries in Chelsea thought when you were doing this, because your work has been not compared, but we usually talk about your work in relationship to Dan Flavin. So it almost looks like a Dan Flavin gone homeless and
Leaving Chelsea.
leaving Chelsea, kind of begging maybe.
Yeah.
And I think it's so powerful to put it in such a different context.
Yeah, and also maybe one thing that I was purposely made or planned for the video was to do the video in a Sunday, where all the market, art market or museums and everything is closed. And so it was a way also for me, even if it's like a critical piece or something, it's very optimistic at the same time, because you can still do some kind of art in a day that all the galleries are closed.
Maybe we can move on. I want to make sure that that we go through all the slides.
Music.
Well, music and collaboration.
Yes. So when I did the video, another idea came up, and it was very interesting to start dealing with musicians and how musicians work, and how it's different from the visual arts or performance art, or because they are completely different channels.
Genres.
So since I started working with, using versions of songs and using the lyrics of songs, you also have to get permission to do that, because that's required by the music industry, So
Art is a different thing.
yes,
but yeah.
Artists sometimes do whatever they want, but sometimes I think it's interesting to really understand how the two different worlds
Absolutely.
work. So I realized that one interesting way to deal with that situation was to invent my own record label as an artist. And instead of going to, let's say, when you need the rights to publish a new song, instead of explaining everything to the person that has to give you the permission, that is an art piece, that is a sculpture, or a performance, where it's very difficult to really make them understand, because they are completely from a different world. You say, I have a record label, I need the permission of this song. And they say, okay, sure, here it is. Then you have no
problem.
No problem. And you just follow the channels, So, and then you work with the music industry, but in the visual arts. you know, and that's very interesting because it's, I don't know, I mean, imagine like you can buy music for very little money, you know, where art is way more expensive, you know, so, but the work is the same. I mean, both,
The
the
artistry.
practice and the artistic process
Right.
is, in both cases, it has the same value, you
Yeah.
know.
We should mention the name of your record label. It's Hueso Record. It's out there.
So it has to do hueso because it's a bone, you know, and it has to do with the idea of memory, to record memory, and that's sort of like the idea of the project, is recordings, to collect recordings. So this is one of the first collaboration, like a formal collaboration, a publication of a record of a performance we did in collaboration with many other musicians and artists, and it was published by the label. And and then connected to that, there was this installation as a part of the PS1 book art fair. It was what's the name? A project room where we decided to show a collection of records or music made by visual artists, not necessarily made by musicians. So there is this whole collection that is standing on the shelves. That is music with a intention of being a popular music or being in the on iTunes or anything like that. They are really like performance pieces that are recorded in records.
Right. So there's a distinction between artists who perhaps have also practiced as musicians, but that's not what you're doing. It's art in a musical form.
Yeah, like how artists or like visual artists also make music, but that is connected to their practice, not to come up with something else.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's not that they're making pop music.
Right.
Or if they do, it's connected to their usual practice. So for this installation, we invited Cecilia Vicuña, who is also Chilean artist, but lived in New York for a long time. And the reason why we did the project with her was because she wanted to start a record label too, in a similar, idea of create their own music and have her own channel to publish the music. But for some reason she couldn't do it. It didn't work out, and we partnered and to publish to distribute the record, because her record was already made. And for the PS1 fair, we launched her record, and she did a performance during the installation. And the idea that she, with a piece of string, she connected everybody in the room, and it was very beautiful because she told a secret, a different secret to each person in the ear, whisper in the ear, and no one knows what it was.
We should say the record is called Conturco? Is that?
Conturco, yeah.
Was it playing, or was she singing?
No,
Okay.
it was playing. Well, she also sang, but the record also, we played the record, yeah. But that was also a very interesting experience, because you as it's when I also make the difference between being an artist or being a producer, because you, as an artist, you are constantly creating events, like performance, making records, or making sculptures, making exhibitions. So you're not necessarily just an artist. You have to be conscious of so many other things.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of artist as a producer is probably makes more sense.
This work, and I want to try to bridge it to the next work that we're going to talk about, because just to make sure we make sure we have time. You did this also with Courtney Smith, who's your partner, and
Right.
and also worked on this work.
Yes. Also, as collaborating with different artists, my wife, Courtney Smith, who He's an artist. We met in doing shows together. And then our practice kind of became so close, and we decided to start our own kind of like a project together. So the piece here was actually in collaboration with her, and then we invited Cecilia to perform in the piece. So Courtney works usually with geometrical shapes, but very flexible at the same time. So she created the floor in the exhibition in the room, which is like a very constructivist composition, almost like a Mondrian or Malevich, but they are made out of foam and they are loose in the floor, so people can use them. It's hard to see here.
You can reconfigure them.
Yeah. So people can use them and sit and move them around, but since the format is big, they always keep the geometrical composition somehow, but at the same time, the foam is isolation for insulation for sound. So since in the place we were playing music, was also the floor was also used to create a better acoustics in the space. Last night we made a performance, and I'm going to pass Marcela to tell us what happened.
It was a great performance, using work that Iván has used before, that always takes the name of the place where it's shown. So it's a fence. Maybe we can show some of those images. But this one yesterday was very different, in fact, from the other, I think, 3 versions that you've shown, because it added a component, some kind of a gate component made out of wood. And the way to activate the piece, these are some iterations of the fence work. He had I think 24 people inside the space, which I should say it's Chicago manual style. Here in Chicago, it's a space, an art space. And the people who were inside had activated the space by 3 different means. First, they were walking for 8 minutes, and it was very interesting. I was outside the fence, so what happens, that division between what happens in the inside and what happens in the outside is something that maybe we can talk about it a little bit more. But in any case, they walked for 8 minutes, then there was 1 minute break. The second set of 8 minutes, people would hold a rock and had to pass it around. And then the third set of 8 minutes, people had to stay in place and look at each other and have their sight kind of bounce between people. So it's a very interesting way of 3 different ways of connecting with people. I was kind of mesmerized about what was happening inside and how we were reacting on the outside and that division. And what happens just by the mere fact of putting a fence, which obviously has incredible connotations nowadays, which I don't know if you want to talk about that and how the work has changed perhaps meanings, not so much by the work itself, by the formal qualities of the work, but by what's happening, again, outside of the work, kind of the political climate, if you will.
Well, I mean, when the idea of the fence that was, as we were experimenting last night too, it's obviously, it has many, as you said, connotation now and before, because it's obviously an electric fence. It's so strong to have that piece because it makes the noise, the buzz of the electricity, and you don't even, for me, I don't even connect it directly to any particular political situation because it's so physical. It's so direct to you that it already creates this kind of like alienation from the piece. So you are completely submitted to the piece.
Right.
And that's for me is connected to all the other situations that we might think that is connected to a wall or a fence or a jail, electric fences, etc. But as you were saying, every time the piece is shown, it takes the name of the place, and that's what is very important to me, and how the piece takes different configuration depending upon of the physical space. The first time the piece was shown was in an art fair, which is
It's very apropos of
Very-
today and the fact that we're at an art fair. But you showed this at the Armory in 2000. What was it?
12. Yes. So it was a project for the Paul Kasmin Gallery, and they invited me to do a solo project for the fair, for the booth, and so I decided to really take seriously the idea of a fair, understanding the commercial aspect of a fair, understanding the public, what it is sort of like a private public, the circulation of a fair. And so we proposed this very extreme idea to the gallery, and I was lucky that they accepted it and they supported it.
Now, did they give up their own space for this?
Yes,
Really?
that was their space at the fair.
That's pretty radical. I
You
was
know?
expecting
Yeah.
that
so
they had the space and then the space.
no,
but-
it wasn't a project. It was the
It wa-
actual
Wow.
piece for the actual booth. So the proposal was that just to do a piece that it will completely enclose the perimeter of the booth, and work with the idea of the emptiness of the inside of the booth is empty because the actual piece is just the perimeter of the. It's sort of like marking like the land.
Right. Yeah, it's the anti-booth.
Exactly. So the idea was, instead of inviting people to visit the booth, was rejecting people from visiting the booth. But at
Right.
the same time, that was the piece, and it's see-through. So it was, you see the inside, but you're not allowed to enter. And that's the idea of the work with the fences in general. And this is another version that it was made for the a gallery in New Orleans for Prospect Biennial. In that case, the idea was to not to let the people who work at the gallery to enter the rest of the gallery. Only the in front of the desk is the entrance to the gallery. So the workers would go were allowed to go only to the desk and then leave by the same door, you know.
Okay.
So there was no access to the rest of the gallery, only to the working areas. This is an idea for a future model, and this is another idea for shown in another gallery in the Hyundai Gallery in Seoul, in Korea. And in this case, what we did was divided the space in half, and you could only enter because the space had two entrances, one in this side and one in the other side. So you can only enter to the gallery either for one side or for the other. So you were never able to walk through
Yeah.
in the complete space.
Yeah, that idea of duality, or having access to half of something, yes, it wants me want to talk about this work, and ¿dónde está o dónde están? It's a phrase that, especially knowing that Iván is from Chile and other countries in the Southern Cone, it instantly evokes the memory of the disappeared during the dictatorships. And that's a phrase that you almost immediately think, oh yeah, ¿dónde están los desaparecidos? Where are the disappeared? But there's a kind of a change in that something that perhaps I expect viewers were not expecting or ready to see this flip side. You want to talk a little bit about it?
So during the time of the during the 80s in Latin America, when almost like 80% of the countries were in a dictatorship, and the atrocities to human rights were very common, and people were disappearing for no reason. People were being kidnapped or killed, and families would never know again where their relatives were. This center, or this question, was very common through all these Latin American countries that had the same problem, which was "Donde están?" Like, where are they? And that would refer directly to the disappear. So in 2007, the dictatorship in Chile ended in 1989. So only 8 years later, the problem was still, very fresh in the society. People were, there are people who never appear again. They were killed and never, their remains were never found. So, and more interesting, the people who worked during the Pinochet, the dictatorship government, many of them have never been properly judged by the laws, by the court. So there are people that are still living freely in society. So thinking about that situation, and then I thought, why don't we remake this question, and we say, where are those people? Like the people the perpetrators. What are they doing now? Where, are they still living, in their houses? Are they retired? They are enjoying their retirement plans or whatever, while other people that were killed are still suffering because they don't know where their families are. So the "Donde están?", instead of referring to the victims, refer to the victimizers. So in the project, what I did was to make this brochure, and when people enter to the exhibition space through this ramp, each one would receive a flashlight and the brochure. So inside the brochure, there is a little, a tiny biography or a tiny explanation of all of these people that at the time did work for the dictatorship or had a connection to the dictatorship and commit some kind of human rights abuse. So in each one of the names, there is a little explanation, what did they do during dictatorship. So once you enter the gallery or the exhibition space, in this case was a cultural center in Santiago, you had to use your flashlight, and that was the only way that would kind of let you go through the space. And the ramp will take you directly to the second floor of the gallery. And then where the windows were, I replaced it by these mirror pieces that were more like empty bookshelves. And then on the floor of the space were written as a crossword puzzle, the name of all those people that were in the brochure. So the idea, people with the flashlight would look on the floor for the name of the people, and once they find a name, they can look in the brochure and read, what did they do.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that, you can throw light, literally, at these names and find them, but there's always also implicit the idea that when you move on to the next name, that person's going to go back to anonymity, to obscurity, to impunity. and that frustration that is still pretty much, I imagine, lived through, people in Chile over not knowing and what happened to those people, to the perpetrators. That it's embedded in that work of having the flashlight. You find a name, but then you have to move on to the next one, and so they're still out there, so to speak.
And also, what's interesting is to use the same kind of like a surveillance equipment or whatever, like a flashlight that is very sort of like such a policeman, like an object. It's almost like a gun, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But it was in order to find the perpetrator, not the victim.
Yeah.
So that was the idea of the project, how to turn the thing around.
Yeah, and I think that, exactly, that goes to this work and turning objects of torture or of surveillance into something, flipping it on its head.
Yeah. Oh, so just a reminder, we've been going from the latest pieces to the earliest pieces. So now we started with the water towers in 2014 or 13, and this piece is in 2001. So this piece is called You Sit, You Die, and it was, for me, really like my first important piece as an artist, as understanding what did I wanted to do with lights and with fluorescent lights and materials that I was already working with when I moved from Chile to New York. So basically, this is a version of the electric chair. The electric chair was invented by Edison in 1885, and it's a device for capital punishment that is still in use in the United States. At the time I made the piece was in 2002, and it was still in use in the state of Florida. So I took all these, all the names that you see in the right side, that were all the people that until 2001, all the people that have been executed in the electric chair in the state of Florida. So it's a piece specifically made for Florida, or commenting specifically about the situation in Florida, and that's why it has the shape of a lawn chair.
Yeah. I think I know, Iván, that you have to leave in a little bit. He has to catch a flight. But I want to give maybe the chance to someone in the audience to ask at least one question, because you and I have been chatting. So I already see a hand, so perfect.
Sorry.
Hello. Hey, Iván. I wanted to go back to the water towers because I know that street artists sometimes comment on similar things by leaving their marks, trespassing and leaving marks on water towers. Have you ever had any unintentional collaborations with your water tower installments? And what do you think about this idea of trespassers leaving graffiti on water towers in general?
What you mean in real water
Yes.
tower? Well, when I made the water towers, I tried to fabricate the water tower with the actual, fabricators of water towers. But so that was the first approach, just try to make the actual and use and understanding how they work. But they are meant to hold water, so it's a completely different construction, so I couldn't make it, so I had to make them in my studio. And then I wanted to use even used ones, because just recuperating what you're saying. It wasn't possible, unfortunately. And I knew about the memory that all those things keep. But for the idea of the construction, like a formal problems, it just didn't work out. But when you refer, in what context is specifically you're talking about?
I just wondered if anyone had left marks on. Had anyone, are these installations left up overnight? Had people deface them or added to them?
Like
or-
a vandalism.
yeah,
Yeah.
Tag them.
No, it hasn't happened.
not happened.
No,
Okay.
no. Thank you.
Maybe one more? One
Yeah,
last question?
yes.
Anyone? Well, I have one question quickly. Why Florida with the lounge? You said you die.
Why in Florida?
Yeah. So many other states also do capital.
I think at that time there was a controversy with the Bush family,
Ah,
you know, but because the Bush brother, I can't remember his name, the brother
Jeff.
of George,
Yeah.
Jeff,
uh-huh.
he was supporting the Florida execution in the electric chair strongly. So it was a comment on that mainly, and then. The idea of the lawn chair, I made it before I added the text, you know, so it kind of all things at some point came together, kind of like almost randomly, you
Right.
know. I was making a lawn chair
Uh-huh.
or a beach chair, and then I found all these records or the list of people executed in Florida, and I became very interested in that situation, and then I kind of, everything made sense.
Made sense.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, if there isn't another question, oh, there's one hand I see. And with that, we'll conclude. Yeah.
Hello. Quick question about the project of Donde Están. Since you got super close to the facts, no, like the names of these people and what they actually did, were you able to actually meet these people in person, like first-hand connection to them, or
There was I didn't meet them directly, but people left comments in the book. You know, where we had a book for like a notebook, and there was a comment of somebody who was the grandson of one of the person that was inside, and he was very, very upset. He said, "You're totally missing the point. My grandfather didn't do what you're saying he did." You know. So those things happen, and it's interesting. I mean, for me, you know, I think it's interesting to provoke those things, you know, because I'm not directly judging anybody, you know. I'm just creating the situation, like where you kind of makes you think about it, and this person reacted very strongly, and yeah.
Well, I think we're going to conclude now our conversation. Thank you, Iván, for
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, talking about your work, and thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.